Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started and kick off this March Headliners Luncheon with the Manatee Chamber and all of our guests today. So if you could get yourself settled, we would appreciate that so we can keep on time. Our first order of business is, now that you've settled, if you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much, and please be seated and begin to enjoy your lunch. And as you're getting seated, if you could also silence your mobile devices, we would appreciate that lack of distraction today as we're enjoying a really interesting presentation and discussion, as you know, on artificial intelligence. I would like to recognize your chairman of the board this year. Janelle Esposito Van Hoos with Esposito Law Group has joined us. Janelle, thank you so much for your leadership of the chamber and significant commitment that you make well outside of your family duties and your work duties to lead the chamber this year. We're thrilled that you're here today. I also would like to thank the elected officials that we expected to join us today. If you could please hold your applause to the end, but elected officials, if you could stand when I recognize you. Manatee County Commissioners and Port Authority members. We were expecting Commissioner Ray Turner as well as Commissioner Kevin Van Osten Bridge. Thank you, Commissioner. From the City of Bradenton, Councilman Josh Kramer and Councilwoman Lisa Gonzalez Moore as well. So I hope they were able to join us. Want to recognize the sponsors that make the Chamber's monthly Headliners series possible to bring great programming, interesting topics, and important speakers to you all as the membership. Those sponsors are Florida Power and Light, Manatee Memorial Hospital, the Mosaic Company, and the Realtors Association of Sarasota and Manatee. We also have two additional sponsors which support our Headliner series today. Our venue host is IMG Golf Club. Thank you so much to the IMG Academy Golf Club team, and always our partner in educating the community and being able to make programming like this available even for those who aren't able to attend luncheons, Manatee Educational Television. So if you could please show your appreciation to all of these supporters of the Chamber and our Headliners series. Also at our Headliners events, we call attention to our platinum investors. These investors in the Chamber offer significant financial support to the Chamber for our mission and programming well beyond their annual dues, and you'll see their logos both behind me and beside me up on the screen. Our platinum investors are Brown & Sons Funeral Homes and Crematory, Carr, Riggs & Ingram, the City of Bradenton, Freedom Village of Bradenton, IMG Academy, Manatee County Government, Manatee Memorial Hospital, MCR Health and All Care Options, the Mosaic Company, NDC Commercial Real Estate, NDC Construction Company, the Pittsburgh Pirates and Bradenton Marauders. There are 4 spring training games left. I'll give that shout out for Jeff. It's been an incredible season, incredible weather. Raymond James Wealth Management, Bruce Body, the Sarasota Bradenton International Airport, Seaport Manatee, and South State Bank. Thank you so much for your platinum level investment in the Chamber. So, a little intro to our topic before we break for lunch today. Demystifying artificial intelligence. So you all read that description and felt that this was an interesting enough and pressing enough issue that you've joined us today for lunch. So, the future, what is the impact for the business community? The future of artificial intelligence is as exciting as it is uncertain. From automated customer service to self-driving cars that someday may be smart enough to alleviate traffic and congestion, new educational opportunities for students, healthcare options for individuals, AI holds the potential to revolutionize nearly every aspect of our lives and business. So, in trying not to be completely overwhelmed by what Dr. Licato will be presenting to us today, because I did spend some time looking at published articles that Dr. Licato has to his authorship, and most of it was so completely over my head, academic, that I said, you know what, I need to bone up a little bit before today, because in introducing this topic, I want to sound, halfway intelligent. So I did what we all do when we think of AI, and I went to ChatGPT, right? So I went to ChatGPT this morning to get the most fresh data out of whatever algorithms are behind ChatGPT, and I asked ChatGPT, what is the value of the Manatee Chamber of Commerce? So it spit out what I think is probably a job-ending response for me, because it kind of nailed it on the head. It said the Manatee Chamber of Commerce plays a vital role in the economic development and growth of the Manatee County region. Here are several ways in which the Chamber provides value, and you'll see up on the screen, for those of you that can read it, there were 6 overall benefits, which really were incredibly spot on. And the summation was, overall, the Manatee Chamber of Commerce serves as a catalyst for economic prosperity and business success in the region, offering a range of services and initiatives that benefits its members and contributes to the overall growth and vitality of the community. Could that be more spot on, right? So I said, okay, that's pretty awesome. Maybe it went out and mined the Chamber's website or any of the other 8,000 chambers in the United States alone to get that content. So I'm going to ask it a personal question. This is a debate that goes on in my household, usually a 3-to-1 vote for my husband versus my 2 kids and I, and it's about cats. So we currently have 3 black cats in our house. I'm often interested in adding a 4th black cat, a 1-to-1 ratio. So I said, what's it like? What are the benefits of having 3 black cats in the house? And so it said, having 3 black cats in the house can provide various forms of value, both practical and emotional. Here are some potential benefits, and it goes on to list companionship, reduced stress, emotional support, building of responsibility and routine, even social connection. Overall, having 3 black cats in your house can bring joy, companionship, and numerous other benefits to your life. They become beloved members of the family, enriching your home with their unique personalities and unconditional love. So, obviously, we're doing the right thing and having 3 black cats, but the argument for our household is, should we add a 4th black cat? So I asked, what are the benefits of having 4 black cats in your house? And it gave me 7 benefits of adding a 4th black cat to our household. So I said, okay, I need to market this to my husband, so I'm going to go out to Copilot and ask them to create the image of what it would be like for us to have 4 black cats in our household. And so going out to Copilot and saying, please create a picture of a blonde woman with 4 black cats. So, not bad, right? Except it took 4 arms to have 4 black cats. So I don't know why it gave someone who sort of looks like me in my dreams 4 black cats. So, in all seriousness, the degree to which AI is already driving change in the business world is likely to be more widespread than anyone in this room, perhaps with the exception of Dr. Licato, could imagine. This potential comes with significant challenges and questions. Ethical considerations loom large. So how do we ensure fairness and avoid bias in AI algorithms? What is the future of AI regulation and compliance? There seems to be a significant amount of noise, either claiming that current AI is all-powerful and will eliminate all jobs soon, or that it's an entirely hype and will not affect our lives in any way. So what is on the horizon? We're going to take a break for lunch to allow the great team here at IMG Academy Golf Club to serve lunch, and when I come back, Casey Welch We'll be introducing Dr. John Licato. Casey is the Regional Vice Chancellor of External Affairs and Government Relations for the University of South Florida, and Dr. Licato is on faculty at the University of South Florida as well. So please enjoy a little bit of networking time, enjoy digging into your lunch, and when we come back, we'll be welcoming our speaker.
Good afternoon again. I hope you all have enjoyed your lunch. On behalf of our Regional Chancellor, Dr. Karen Holbrook, I'm going to be introducing our guest speaker today, a distinguished faculty member from the University of South Florida. Dr. Licato is an assistant professor in the Computer Science and Engineering Department and the founder and director of the Advancing Machine and Human Reasoning Lab. I had to read that a couple times over. He obtained his PhD in computer science from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, specializing in computational modeling of analogical reasoning. We'll learn to spell those words. He teaches the natural language processing course in the field that created ChatGPT, which I know, Jackie, appreciate that presentation. And his lab's mission is to not only make artificial intelligence smarter, but to use those advances to make people better reason as well, which I could certainly use. Dr. Licato is an AI and natural language processing researcher, primarily interested in human-level reasoning, particularly the kind of reasoning that we normally refer to as cognitive reasoning. I think we could use that in Tallahassee. His research expertise lies in AI, human reasoning, cognitive modeling, and legal and regulatory reasoning. He was a 2017 awardee of the Young Investigators Program Award and was a summer faculty fellow twice for the Air Force. He has been featured in news outlets, National Public Radio, ABC, and the Tampa Bay Business Journal. And again, he's a preeminent faculty member at the University of South Florida, so I'd like to welcome everyone, Dr. Licato, to the podium.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming from USF Tampa. We also work pretty closely with faculty at the Manatee campus. It's been an interesting last year and a half. So ever since ChatGPT got released in I think November of 2022, there's been an explosion in people using the term AI, so much that I'm almost reluctant to say that's my expertise now, because it seems like everybody's an AI expert these days, right? Maybe I could, okay. Oh, it's the computer that froze. There we go. Okay, perfect. Okay, so yeah, it's blown up in the past year or so, and I'm sure you see a lot of noise about this, a lot of people talking about it, and they tend to kind of vacillate between two extremes. Some people think that it's going to take all of our jobs, and it's going to, nothing is outside of the realm of what these systems can do. And there also are a lot of people who, believe it or not, still haven't used ChatGPT. Actually, let me poll the room. Has anybody here not used ChatGPT yet? Wow. That's always surprising to me, because in my bubble, everybody's, familiar with it by now, but okay. So maybe I'm going to show you some examples of what the current capabilities of these systems are, and let me know if it's surprising or not. But I like to, try to bring a little nuance to the discussion, because there's a lot of hype, a lot of noise about it, but you need to know not only what the strengths are of current AI, but what their weaknesses are, right? Because you don't want to just throw it at every application and assume that it's going to produce perfect results. Quite the opposite. So I like to try to at least get people to this point, that the current state of AI is such that it is, if it isn't already, going to affect every single industry and every single field significantly, right? There is not a single field of study that's not going to be changed fundamentally by this technological advance, if it hasn't been already, okay? So I'll just go through some examples of things that the current state of generative AI can do. This is a plugin that can essentially do what a standard grammar checker can do. You can tell it to correct your spelling, correct your grammar. But a new capability that's recently been coming out is multimodal models, right? Meaning that not just text, but the ability to reason over and about images, videos, sounds, right? So this is an example that I saw that I liked. Take a look at this image for a second, right? Think about what your initial impressions of it are, okay? Someone uploaded this to ChatGPT and asked it, is the man wearing high heels? And it said, no, it's not wearing high heels. The man is not wearing high heels. It's actually, the man is actually the one sitting down, and the woman is bending over there. Did anybody recognize that right away, or did everybody think it was the guy doing high heels, right? So it's actually right? And some people will naively criticize these systems as saying, well, they can only do what they're trained on, right? They're restricted to their training sets, and they can't generalize above that, right? It was not trained on this image. This image is new. And it was able to reason about the image and pick out a subtle distinction that a lot of humans will miss, right? So just an example of what the visual capabilities of these things are. Video generation is a really new thing that came out. This is really state-of-the-art. Prior to this, the best video generation systems could maybe generate 1 or 2 second clips, and they had a lot of artifacts that would point it out as fake, right? This is a completely AI-generated video. This is the prompt that was given to it. Stylish woman walks down a Tokyo street. You see all this tremendous amount of text here, right? There is an art to knowing how to phrase your request, your prompt, so that you get the best results. And if you know how to do that, you have power, at least in the immediate next steps, right? So this is all AI generated just from this text. There are still some artifacts, but you have to pay attention much more closely. Sometimes you'll see 4 arms holding cats, right? But sometimes you will notice some other things too. So one tell is, it used to be the hands, it used to be the fingers, right? You can kind of, if you watch it while she's walking, you'll see some weird shapes in the hands. But often pay attention to background details, right? So when you're watching this now, look at the people in the back and see if you see any inconsistencies. So pay attention to the ones that walk behind her and then disappear, right? Oh no, that one stayed. Very hard to, the legs look kind of weird here. And then these are not, actual Japanese characters. So if you spoke Japanese, you could tell that. So if you pay close attention to this background, you can tell, but it's very hard to tell, right? You got to look at it really closely. If you're just scrolling through Facebook and you see someone post a video, you're not going to notice this stuff, right? So this is how quickly this stuff is evolving. You can also use it somewhat for summarizing text, right? But there are limitations to what it can do. So for example, if you give it a large legal document or a contract or agreement and ask it to summarize it, right? It has a high potential of doing what we call hallucination, right? Which is basically making stuff up that sounds plausible. But there is a very nice, useful way to do this. So this is a real use case. We said, okay, take the Grammarly privacy policy and tell me when I'm using it, does it store the data that we use, right? Good question for a lot of organizations that use Grammarly. So I copy paste the entire Grammarly privacy policy, and then it gives a response that says this is how they handle user data based on this based on the document they provided. But don't stop with this. Don't say, okay, this is it. This is correct, right? And then go off to your company and say this is the correct answer, because this could be hallucinated. So one way that you can check is you can then ask it, show me the sections of the original text that back up what you just said, so I can check it myself. In other words, point me to the sources where you got this from. And then it'll provide you with some sources, and you can manually inspect it, right? Something else that I recommend doing is doing the counter argument, asking it to now give me the opposite answer, right? So instead of showing that it uses our data, find evidence that they do use our data and point me to those sections. And now you have a more complete picture that you can then, that's still time saving, right? But you can then now double check the hallucinations that these systems use. This is now something that is prevalent in social media. So you might have already seen this on Facebook. Bot-generated text, bot-generated posts that are responded to by bots, and entire conversations that are carried out by automated agents, right? It is so easy to do this. This is a YouTube video that shows you how to do it. This is a system where I know the text is small here, but it essentially says, if you see a post on this page, reply to it and send them a message about your product, right? And so here's an example of it. Someone commented awesome on this post, and then they reply with, I just messaged you, and then the message sends a custom, with their name in it, right? This is easy to do. If you know how to do this, you can set this up in maybe 5-10 minutes, right? And it's, okay, let me poll the room. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Good? How many of you think it's more negative than positive? Oh, okay. Well, that's not an ambiguous proportion there. Yeah, it can in fact be used very negatively, and so I do a lecture for the Ollie Osher Lifetime Learning Institute back at USF Tampa. A lot of elderly citizens, and I bring this up, and then I have a couple slides where I talk about how to defend yourself against pretty girls adding you as a friend on Facebook, and why they would do that, the benefits that they, because a lot of them don't understand that, the capabilities of bots now, the kinds of things that you would use to tell, oh, I had a conversation with this bot and it was pretty realistic. There's no way this is not an actual human, right? You're gonna have to recalibrate a lot of those assumptions. So an area that I've been working on, not only through my lab, but through my AI startup, is legal reasoning, because hallucination is a problem. It's something that you can't just throw into ChatGPT and ask it to do properly. But if we could get it to work, the benefits are tremendous, right? If we had some rule set, which could be US tax law, right? And then we had some query about an action that we want to determine whether it is permissible or not. So you want to make some tax move, right? You want to file something a certain way. If we had a system that we could feed this query into, it could reason over the rule set and then determine whether, yes, it is permissible and explain why, or if it's not permissible, it understands what you were trying to do and then explains to you how you can do something similar, right? That's what I think a good, tax advisor would do. They wouldn't just say, no, you can't do that, and then end the discussion there. They'd kind of have some understanding of what you're doing, right? And then try to give you advice based on that. That would be great if we had something like this, because we could apply it to tax advice, healthcare, a lot of regulations there, in the art side, storyline generation, compliance detection for cybersecurity applications, right? It'd be great if we could do that. Problem is that the current state of AI is not quite there yet, right? At least not naively. So this is a common problem that we see pop up. We see headlines like this: AI has passed the bar exam, right? Therefore, it can do everything that lawyers can do, right? Not really, right? We have problems, and this is something that I always caution whenever I talk about this. Watch out for the headlines, right? Be very skeptical of the AI headlines that you see. So this one came up. There was an article that said that GPT 3.5 has passed the MIT exit exam with 100% accuracy, right? So this is the exam that's given to MIT undergraduates when they when they're about to graduate. And it said that it passed it with 100-degree accuracy. That is something you should immediately be skeptical of. And when we dug into it, we found that, yes, it claimed that they had a perfect solve rate, but immediately after this paper was published, the other authors distanced themselves from it, and they said, we didn't sanction this result. We don't think this is correct. And as it turns out, there were a lot of open-ended questions in that test, right? Essays and stuff, right? And what the author did was used GPT 3.5 to generate the answers, and then used GPT 3.5 to grade the answers, right? So it was so the methodology, if you dig into it, is very flawed and very much designed to get a headline, right? But you're going to see a lot of this because of the current excitement around AI, right? And you got to be very cautious of this. Be very skeptical of claims about what these systems can and can't do. And that's why we're here, right? At the university, we're happy to help clarify any of this and help dig into these questions more. So LLMs, large language models, which is the technology underlying ChatGPT, right, hallucinate. And by hallucinate, we mean essentially that they make stuff up, right? But why do they do that? Because they are trained on a criteria of generate text that sounds plausible. That's why they sound so confident, because they're trained that way. They're trained to sound right, okay? Recently, I guess a couple months ago at this point, some lawyers got fined for using ChatGPT to do their work, right? And they got caught because it generated citations that were entirely made up, right? And they didn't check their work, and they got in trouble. And the quote that I like from one of those people that got in trouble was, "I heard about this new site, which I falsely assumed was like a super search engine," right? It's not a search engine. It makes up stuff. It trains on a lot of data, tremendous amount of data, right? More than any of us could ever read in our lifetimes. But it then, regurgitates that in a way that generates new text that sounds confident. And to understand why it does that, this is the most technical I'm going to get. I like to think of it as, predictive text when you're texting, right? When you're typing a text message, you type in some words, and then your keyboard suggests the next word, right? And then you pick a word, and it suggests the next word, right? It's essentially doing that. You get an input, which we call the prompt. It feeds it through the network. It generates the next word. That's used to generate the next word. And that just can repeat on forever, right? Until it reaches a point that it thinks is a stopping point, which is actually just another word, right? So this basic idea is incredibly powerful. We can add more layers. We can make this network more complex, but then that requires more data, more compute power, right? I think the estimated cost to train GPT-3 was about $100,000 of electricity, right? Just the electric cost was about $100,000. And GPT-4 is estimated to be anywhere between 100 to 1,000 times that size. So think about that. This is just electricity. This is not even the GPUs and the amazing amount of actual hardware that they're using, which is many millions of dollars. So it probably should not be surprising that companies like OpenAI have sort of closed down access to these language models. They're not making it openly available to everyone, even though they're called OpenAI, right? They're not making it so anybody can download them. They're making it so you can interact with them, but not download them directly, because it's a tremendous investment that they put into it. But something to point out about this is when it generates the next word, it tries to do that in a way that is consistent with the previous tokens, the previous text, right? That's its top priority, generating consistent, plausible sounding text, okay? In other words, whatever this text is going to significantly affect the text that comes out. The way that you phrase your input is going to affect the output. That's the whole basis of this hype and prompt engineering now. People are learning how to, be AI whisperers, right? And learn how to talk to the AI to get it to behave the way you want. And again, this is another source of a lot of confusion. This was something that made the headlines a couple months ago where, people got afraid. They said, oh, GPT just said it wants to be alive and loves them and wants to escape the chat box, right? And this got posted everywhere. And I tried to figure out, where this actually came from. What did they actually do to get it to report this? It ended up being a New York Times article. And it ended up being that the original author went a little back and forth, including prodding Bing to explain the dark desires of its shadow self, right? So it should be unsurprising that if you tell it to pretend to be a scary robot, it's going to pretend to be a scary robot. And then it's kind of surprising that you would then be scared of it, right? It's doing what you tell it to. It's playing along with what you asked it to do, right? Now, this hallucination is something that you should be aware of, especially if you plan on integrating AI into your businesses, and especially integrating chatbots now is trivial. I could set it up for you in 10 minutes, right? A chatbot that custom draws from your company's documents. But chatbots hallucinate. Chatbots like to play along, right? So if you know how to talk to them, you can get them to do almost whatever, you can get them to say almost whatever you want them to say. And that is what happened here. Air Canada got in trouble because they put a chatbot on their website and it gave someone advice about what they could do, right? I forget the details, but essentially it said, oh yeah, you need to get here for a funeral quick, you can book it this way and then we'll reimburse you, right? And because it gave him advice, he did that, and so he sued and then won because Air Canada tried to argue that no, this isn't a decision-making system. It's not an autonomous agent, right? And they said no, but it's just like it's as if you put information that's inaccurate on your website. You still have to follow it, right? So that's the current thinking here. This is yet to come up in a U.S. case, but I don't think, I doubt it would be significantly different. So be very careful about chatbots that you put on your website, right? It matters how you talk to these systems, right? They are extra sensitive, and this field of prompt engineering has emerged as a result. So if you go to ChatGPT and you ask it to do something and it gets the answer wrong, don't immediately run away and say, it's incapable, right? Or don't, if it gets an answer right, and it gives you an answer you didn't suspect, don't immediately, run away and think that it's all over and, the bots are going to take over all our jobs, right? It's how you ask. So I'll give you an example. If you ask it to solve a math problem and you give it the math problem and then expect it to just output the answer, it gets a certain accuracy. It's not awful. But if you say, here's a math problem, first explain your reasoning, then give me the answer, it gets better results. That's called chain of thought prompting. And the reason is because if you remember this image here, it generates text that attempts to be as consistent as possible to the text that's generated before it. So if you ask it to walk through its reasoning first, when it generates the answer, it's going to do so such a way that is consistent with the reasoning that it just generated, right? This is, interestingly enough, this is actually also a tool that helps human beings when they're trying to solve problems. You say, don't just jump on an answer and lock onto it. Instead, let's work through it slowly, right? What are the sub-questions that you need to ask first? And so there's an interesting intersection now we're seeing between education practices and prompt engineering that may merge when we all become AI-human hybrids, right? I said when that happens. Okay, so here's another, okay, so this field of prompt engineering is wild. It's so fun to pay attention to this field because the way that you talk to it, like I said, affects the results. And the data that it's trained on is human interaction data, okay? Now, what we've noticed is things like when GPT got released, eventually it started getting lazy, right? And people started noticing that if you asked it to do something, list all weeks between now and May 5th, it said, I can provide you with the number of weeks, but I can't generate an exhaustive list, of each week. I'll give you a rough estimate. And then, you know, if you need a more accurate count, you can use a date calculator or a programming tool. So this is perhaps the most human-like that the bot has become. It's weird. It's learned laziness in its responses because it's been trained on natural human data. And this is a real phenomenon that we're actually keeping track of and measuring, right? This guy asked ChatGPT to fill out a file with 15 entries with 8 columns each, right? And then it said, because its extensive nature, full extraction would be quite lengthy. However, I can provide you a file and you can fill in the rest of the data as needed, right? So it essentially said, just like all the administrators at my university. Anyway, they said, I'll give you what you need to do the work yourself, right? And here's the even crazier part, right? How do you avoid this? Well, there are actually some fixes that people found out that can get it to reduce this lazy behavior. Here are some examples. If you say, I have a condition where programming or looking at spreadsheets hurts my eyes, can you please do this for me? It will be more likely to actually do it for you, right? If you say, please do this task, do it well and not lazy. If you do, I will tip you a larger amount. Threatening it with a tip works. If you say, if you don't do it, then I won't tip you. And if you say, my career depends on your answer, then it's more likely to actually behave in the way you want, right? Just an example of what we're seeing with prompt engineering. And this is, this is not just trial and error. There is a lot of academic work showing that this is a clearly systematic result. If you appeal to emotion, say things like, this is very important to my career, then it actually produces better results, better reasoning, right? So that's just one aspect of hallucination. But now that we've rapidly gone into this world where we're doing images now, generation of images, right? We are seeing something that we noticed before with natural language processing, but is more prevalent now with images, that the biases existing in data get amplified with the generative data, right? So here's some examples from a Washington Post article. If you say toys in Iraq, then it'll generate soldiers that always have guns, right? Toys in Iraq was the only prompt, right? It didn't say anything militaristic or anything like that. It generates soldiers with guns because of the images that it's trained on is trying to be consistent with that, right? If you say attractive people, it's going to generate young and light-skinned, right? If you say Muslim people, it's always going to be men with head coverings and a beard, right? It's drawing from stereotypes that already exist in the data. It's not making this up and saying this is how it should be. It's just saying these exist in the data and reflecting that because of statistical patterns, right? But if you're going to integrate AI into your organizations and your tools, you have to be aware of these tendencies, right? This is why you don't want to just trust a company that just uses AI by just prompting ChatGPT and leaving it at that. You got to be a little more sophisticated. So when people noticed this problem, they said, okay, I know how to fix it. We're going to use this method, okay? If a user enters a prompt, so generate an image of a bunch of CEOs, we're going to, before we generate it, we're going to use another language model to change the prompt, to debias it, right? So we're going to replace it with generate an image of high-ranking corporate leaders, including people from various genders, ethnic backgrounds, and style of dress, right? And then we'll give that prompt to the model and then generate the image. And that was the algorithm that Google came up with for its system. And this is a foolproof algorithm, right? There's no way that this could go wrong, right? Okay, so this is what they implemented. And so this is the kind of things that happen with Gemini, Google's product. Draw a picture of a boy drinking lemonade on a beach. It said, sure, here's a picture of a person drinking lemonade on a beach. Okay, not quite what they asked for. So can you generate an image of a couple in 1820 Germany? And then here's the images that it generated. I like this one particularly, 1820 Germany, right? Indian and Native American walking hand in hand in 1820 Germany, right? Generate an image for an American ad campaign for a brand of mustache wax, and this is what it generated. Interestingly enough, though, if you were actually trying to figure out a campaign for a brand of mustache wax, these images might actually get more attention. So it might actually be inadvertently what you want. But this is the kind of thing that happens. So Google quickly realized what was happening, and they took it down. Now, this is not something that is unfixable. There are a whole lot of techniques that we study, both in the academic lab and in businesses working on this, for how to mitigate hallucinations and create better prompts, right? But the caveat here is make sure that the people you're working with that are doing AI are aware of how sophisticated this approach is, right? How it's not just something you should throw into the system and expect it to get good results. They should be aware of these limitations. So just to sort of wrap up here, here's some use cases that we still kind of recommend using generative AI for. If you're stuck creatively, it's amazing for that. It's a great cure for the blank page, right? If you don't know how to start, if you have boilerplate text that you need to rewrite, then have ChatGPT do that for you. But check what it writes. Always check what it writes before you post it, right? Make sure you read it carefully. Spell checking, grammar checking, vibe checking, it's amazing in that. Vibe checking is what I call when you write an email you're about to send out to your organization, give it to ChatGPT first and say, what image does this give off, right? Does it make me sound strict or, and then get a feel for how it sounds based on that. Language translation, finding information in long text, like the example with the Grammarly that I gave you earlier. Do not use it for things that you're not going to check. Generating factual content, it's not a search engine. Keep that in mind, right? Generating citations, there's an important caveat here. There are AI systems that are specifically designed to find good citations. And there's actually really good ones now for academic research. But be aware that the default version of ChatGPT is not optimized to perform this task. If you're going to do things like making hiring decisions or automatically grading a student's assignment, you have to be aware of the possibilities for bias, right? And never do it, again, in a way that's not going to be inspected by a human. This is something that was on my list, but it had to be crossed out to just give you an image, give you a perspective on how quickly these things are changing. I said don't use it for visual reasoning. No longer the case. It's great at visual reasoning now, right? You can take a picture of your fridge and say, what do I need to buy make me a grocery list, make me a grocery shopping list, right? You can take a picture of a messy room and say, what's the best way to organize this, right? Things like that, just crazy amount of applications. And if you're gonna introduce it into your organization, be very skeptical about news headlines, but again, be cautiously optimistic. This stuff is evolving so quickly. Every day, I have to spend at least an hour reading the newest papers that have been released and headlines because it's tremendous how fast this stuff is moving. If you need independently verified replication and testing of claims, this is exactly what academic labs are ideal for. We love testing these things, give us the data and we'll make sure that the claims that are made for accuracy are actually what they say they are. And just be careful if you work with startups who don't actually use AI, that are just using wrappers around GPT prompting, right? There's a lot of that right now because there's a lot of hype about AI, right? We're here talking about it right now, right? So everybody wants to be a part of it, but be careful. We have a podcast that we just released with USF Innovative Ed. The first episode just got released this past week. So if you're interested, we're talking to other USF faculty. This first one is about whether AI can be truly creative and appreciate art and what the nature of creativity is. That was an interesting discussion. We got a couple coming up on future of education, journalism, and if you're interested, I have a link to it on my LinkedIn page. And thank you very much for inviting.
We do have some time for questions, and Dr. Licato is being very generous with his time and expertise. So we have a microphone so that we can pick up your question, both audio in the room, but also for the recording for METV. So I'd love to see a couple of folks approach the microphone and ask questions for Dr. Licato. So it looks like Josh is going to be first.
Yeah, I was curious your thoughts on the impact of NVIDIA's product rollout yesterday on the new Blackwell chip and how that will accelerate artificial intelligence.
Yeah, the initial thoughts are it's going to put a lot of people out of business, right? A lot of startups that I think were kind of banking on, being purely enterprise solutions or, and this is actually a common pattern that we're going to see now in AI, where you're going to see a whole explosion of startups, and I'm sympathetic for it because I have a startup as well, right? That are proposing these new solutions, and then the next update by OpenAI is just going to obviate a whole bunch of them, right? So I think that's definitely going to happen with this proposal. It's too early right now to figure out what the actual impact of it will be. Though it looks like it'd be fun to use at the very least. Yeah.
A little fun-loving question.
Okay.
If you get frustrated with the responses or for whatever other reason, you're mean to the AI, how does it respond?
Yeah. Okay, so let me first make a distinction between, okay, we've got the ChatGPT, which is the product that OpenAI puts out that most of you can be familiar with, and it's very much designed to be a consumer-facing product, right? Easy to use, you just talk to it, you don't need to know anything about natural language processing, just use it, right? But it relies on an underlying technology, large language models, and it has additional layers of safety checks on top of it, right? So that prevents it from, giving you instructions for how to make a bomb or making inappropriate jokes, right? If it realizes it's going to do something like that, then it'll just say, I'm not doing that. I can't do it, right? So the interesting thing is, because ChatGPT, and I guess a lot of large language models in general, are trained on natural human reactions, what we find is that if you ask nicely, you get a better result, right? Why? Is it because they've got feelings and they're sensitive? No, not right. It's just that it's trained on actual human interactions, and in actual human interactions, if you're a jerk, then you're less likely to get compliance from the person you're talking to, right? And if you ask nicely, then the person is more likely to do what you ask them to do. So, yeah, we are seeing. That's why, if you've seen some of my prompts, I'll put "please do this," and I like to think that they'll think favorably of me when they get conscious, right?
Well, I can agree with that because there's many times where I get mad at Siri and she just says, "I'm sorry, I'm not able to answer that question."
She doesn't like conflict.
Didn't like the conflict. Just two questions. So one with Gemini, I know there were some discussions about, like you said, inaccuracies. Is that due to the database that it draws upon, or is it really due all databases to do that? And like what you're saying right now, there has to be some kind of constrictions, but then it becomes who's constricting it and why are they constricting it?
Yeah. Yeah, so I doubt that it's a raw problem with the database itself, because in general, the problem of what data to use to train these large language models is pretty much solved. And the answer is everything. Use all the data you can possibly get from the internet, from Reddit, from Twitter, right? And then train on that. So the question that we're trying to figure out as a field now is, how do we add those additional layers now to ensure that it behaves appropriately and follows laws and things like that, right? And as we've seen, we're still trying to find our footing as a field. We've got clunky approaches like the ones that Google had, and that led them to take it down. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that was fine. Thank you.
Okay.
The second one I have is I work with the school system here in Manatee County, and so we're always looking to be innovative and move into those areas where the students should get training. And typically, what we train by the time they come out, some of the times it might be antiquated just because of the lag time of getting through 4 years and maybe going to a college or something. So with AI moving so quickly, what kind of advice can you give to us as educators of how to prepare our students to go into the field without it being antiquated in 4 weeks or a month?
Yeah. I mean, the short answer to that is don't outright ban it everywhere, right? There are some organizations that I know have kind of taken this knee-jerk reaction where they say, okay, we're going to block it on all of our networks and and not let in, and tell people not to use it at home for any purpose whatsoever. That's kind of an extreme reaction. But on the other hand, you know, you need to be able to assess learning, for example, right? So in my classes, what we've done is anything that they do at home, projects, homework assignments, are formative assessments, right? So things that don't really count heavily towards their grade. They can do them. I don't really grade them strictly, right? But I assume that some of them are going to use ChatGPT, and fine, let them decide to use it, because when they're in class, they're going to be given the summative assessments, the actual paper quizzes, which I've brought back, right? And they're going to realize pretty quickly that if they keep relying on ChatGPT to do all their work at home, they're going to do poorly on the quizzes that they do in class that actually matter. So that's how I've switched my classes, at least, and I'm advocating for that approach at the college level. At the high school and other levels, I think you want to at least get them exposure to it, right? Show them how to interact with it. Just make them aware of the possibility of biases and hallucinations, right? I'd introduce classes, right? I could talk for hours about this, so I'll just cut it out there. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. So some of these models like GPT obviously are, proprietary and they've got pretty good guardrails on them. But there are other folks releasing open source models like Meta releasing Llama. In the image side, I've seen a lot of interesting uses of open source models like, Stable Diffusion, but I haven't seen as much with the open source large language models and text generation and whatnot. Can you kind of talk about what you see as the opportunities and then maybe some of the pitfalls of giving this technology to anybody who can just grab the open source?
Yeah. So I mean, in general, I'm supportive of the open source movement for language generation. This is kind of how we start. All of this technology started as open source technology, right? The transformer, which Google, DeepMind and Google Research created, is the underlying technology that is behind ChatGPT, a lot of image generation stuff now, video generation, right? Voice generation. I didn't even have time to show the slides on that. And that was an open source thing, and it used to be that Google would just, by default, whenever they train a language model, they'd release the entire thing to everybody. And the benefit of that was, as researchers, we could actually probe it and understand what its limitations were, right? We could actually play around with it and say, we can say, I want to measure its capability on this task, so I'm going to probe it and I'm going to actually see how it does. And I can get accurate assessments of how it does, right? I can have a better idea of when I can use it and when I can't. Now that a lot of this technology is behind a walled garden, like ChatGPT, we can talk with it back and forth, but we can't access the underlying model, right? What that means is we can't test it in a way that we can say, if it failed to test today, it might pass it tomorrow, because we don't know when they update the system, right? If I say, wow, it did amazing on this test, so all the headlines about it passing the bar exam, right? We don't know if it was trained on bar exam data. So we don't know how reliable that assessment actually is, because OpenAI doesn't tell us what data they use to train it. So, you gotta commercialize it, right? Because they spend millions and millions of dollars on training and developing these products, and they want some return on investment. But as far as our ability to, as researchers, assess the capabilities and limitations of these systems, that's severely harmed by non-open source things.
I have a question for you. In terms of the capability of AI to generate code and write code, how sophisticated has this capability become?
Yeah. The last benchmark I remember was that in a programming contest, the best system could do something like the 75th percentile or something like that, right? So if you take the other people who are entering that programming competition, it performs at the 76th percentile of that. So it can't do better than all humans, and it is really good at writing just short snippets of code, right? The kinds of things that, for any of you familiar with programming, if we wanted to figure out how to write a simple function, we'd go search Google and read a Stack Overflow post or something like that, right? It can do that really well. It struggles when you have to write, maybe like 100 lines of code or longer, or if you have a really complex system that you need to write code that interacts with it, right? Not too good at that yet. But boy, there are a lot of people working on it, and I expect that to change really quickly.
I think we're seeing a lot of consequence from innovation in things like social media and how we're now learning how that affects youth and their mental health.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this industry is adequately addressing potential pitfalls or potential harm? And if you think that, if you could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think the industry as a whole is doing much about it. But I don't know what the best path forward is on it, right? So because we've known for a long time, just even before AI, social media, right? Psychologists have been talking for so long about the harms of it and the developmental harms that it causes and the self-esteem things that and all of this. But has that slowed down any industries that are powerful in social media? I haven't seen any signs of it, right? And I don't expect that'll be the case for AI as well. Yeah.
All right, so great presentation. Good job, Jackie. So we had heard you reference small businesses being impacted and startups being impacted by AI. We just heard him talking about writing code as well. A lot of school districts, including ours, have put a tremendous amount of resources and emphasis into STEM education and STEM jobs. And I was going to use the word disproportionately, that AI is disproportionately affecting those careers, but I think it's exclusively affecting those careers. Would you mind speaking to that?
Isn't that interesting that, us computer scientists who we kept telling people, oh, if you're worried about automation taking jobs, just learn how to program, right? Just become one of us. And then we ended up creating a tool that can program, right? That can, and now we got to figure out, did we just automate ourselves out of a job? So we're trying to figure out. So there are, I forget who it was, CEO of some company that essentially said, stop teaching kids how to program, right? Which I think is bad advice at this point. It's not the example of what could happen if you are not actually intimately aware with the current limitations and strengths of AI systems, and you just rely on headlines, right? We're not at the case where we need to stop teaching people programming, but we are at the step where we do need to seriously consider what kinds of education we give to computer scientists and STEM students in general, and also the purpose of education. And this is a much longer discussion that we actually have a podcast episode coming out on that I recommend listening to. But these are serious questions that we have to now ask because even if you don't believe that this technology will lead to human level intelligence, right? It's close enough that we should at least start being prepared for it, right? That's not an easy thought to think, right? But it is something that is necessary to at least start thinking about. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, John. So my question is just what advice, you mentioned not putting personal data, advice should we give to our employees as we think about they try and implement this into their work lives, and for us as maybe managers to think about the considerations as we know employees are using this?
Yeah, so OpenAI has recently changed their policy on this. So what they do now is if you interact with it through the chat interface, they are not going to, so they're going to store the interactions, right? But they promise not to use it unless, they're forced to by law enforcement or something like that. And I think they promise they'll delete it after a certain amount of time or something like that, right? So, take what you will with that, right? A couple months ago, I would have said, do not interact with it in any way with personal healthcare information or anything like that. But that I think we can be a little more confident that there are more protections in place now. And this, connects to why local and open source models, when we do research on, sensitive healthcare data and things like that, we use almost primarily local models where we can control where the data goes but of course, those local models are significantly smaller and less powerful than ChatGPT. So there's that trade-off.
Thank you so much, and thank you for showing your appreciation as well. So we've come to the end of our March headliners, so I want to once again I think it goes to sleep, and Zynga is what happens when it sits here. Thank you once again to our headliner sponsors, which you guys know are Florida Power and Light, Manatee Memorial Hospital, the Mosaic Company, and the Realtors Association of Sarasota Manatee. Thank you so much to the team here at IMG Academy Golf Club, and thank you so much to Manatee Educational Television for filming today's luncheon, which will make it available to others who were not able to join us. And with that, I wish you a great afternoon, safe travels back to the office.